Hey chaps, well it has been a considerable amount of time since we last recorded a video together. It must be coming up towards 3 years now, potentially. That's largely down to factors outside of my control, such as my health, house moves, career responsibilities, the list goes on. It's just the way it turned out, and I can only apologise because I did say to everybody that I'll be uploading another video in a week, in 2 weeks, etc. Um, I did lose the code originally to the RPG project, so I had to follow my own tutorials to get back to where we were at previously. And in doing that, I picked up on a few things that I wasn't quite keen on, just due to how my coding practice has changed over the years, and just because things have moved on. MonoGame's moved on in versions, new versions around. MonoGame Extended has moved on. Things have changed there, which may break our code and which do break our code. So I'll go through that as well. Um, and also just the way, yeah, like I said, the way I write stuff's changed too. So I've got some housekeeping items I want to take care of. Feel free to skip those, but I would encourage just for consistency. And then additionally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to an editor project. So we've got our map, we can look around it, but he's not very special. He's kind of simple. So we want to be able to start doing things like dropping tiles on there, making it look pretty, and then from there start playing around, moving around it then. But to do that, we need an editor. So there's some things we'll need to do around that and some foundational work that will pay dividends as we move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to hop right into it and take care of those housekeeping items I just alluded to. So here's the project. I have zoomed it in. I do remember that there was some issue with how small my text was, so I did remember to zoom that in. So first of all, I'm going to tackle some of our housekeeping items. The first things first is upgrading MonoGame. So on our game project, if we right click on him, manage NuGet packages, and head over to installed tab, we've got our installed NuGet packages here. Let's do MonoGame first. Now this is the version we were on previously, 3.60.1625. We're currently a couple of versions behind, so what we want to do is just upgrade to the latest. So we hit update on that guy, and that should just churn away. Yep, okay. It looks like it's got some additional dependencies since we last installed it, which is fine. Is that installing? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. That's MonoGame done, and now I've got to do MonoGame Extended. Now, if I drop this guy down, there's several versions here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versions behind. So there's quite a considerable leap here, so things will have changed. Luckily, we only use one class from MonoGame Extended, but there is a problem with it, and we'll get to that. So if we hop to the latest, stable 3.7.0, update. Okay, and straight away, we are presented with two errors down here. If we hop over to those, what's happened is the camera 2D class has been renamed. It's been made a little bit more fit for purpose and a bit more targeted towards specific use cases. Now in our case, all we need to do is change this to orthographic camera, and again replace that down here too. I won't cover specifically what an orthographic camera is or what orthographic means in this video. I can cover that in another video if you like, but take it from me, this camera is absolutely fine for our use case here. So that is a safe change to make. Now if I hit start, our game loads. We're on the latest version of MonoGame Extended, which is fantastic, and there's no adverse effects. So what I can do now is hop onto the housekeeping items that I alluded to at the start of the video. They're fairly non-intrusive, but they're just things that I know will wind me up as we progress through the series if I don't change them now. So what am I going to do? Well, okay, so I'm going to use the Visual Studio Fantastic Refactor and Rename functionality. I'm just going to right click on this draw function here, rename, and put a capital D at the start of it. There we go. And that's a little bit more C# standardish. When I wrote this originally, I was very much head deep in Java, and we had very odd standards in my place where we did this. I mean, I say it's odd, standards are always subjective, but my preference is to not have these anymore, so I'm going to remove them. So if I right click on device, rename, just call that device, and repeat tile width, camel casing them. Camel casing is where it will start with a lowercase letter, but then every word afterwards is uppercase. Okay, and I'm going to repeat this process for the rest of them. Now you can see when I rename here, you'll see it makes a change down here. This is why the rename and refactor functionality is very good. So if I change that to height, it also puts a this on it so it doesn't confuse the member variable and the parameter. And then if I head over to the main game, I can remove the base draw. Reason for that being MonoGame's overriding functions, or the functions you override in MonoGame rather, they aren't relied upon by the framework, they're just there as convenience methods for you, so you don't need to call into the base at all. There was one more thing I want to do over in the map, and that is I want to make this tile position calculation a little bit more concise, a little bit more compact. I wrote it this way originally because the nature of the work I was doing, it was easier to explain and demonstrate a process iteratively, so showing you how the tile position was calculated through loops, etc. was very beneficial. I'm however going to revert that and go back to something a little bit more concise now, so I'm going to copy this line here with the tile position and drop that down into this loop here. And I'm also going to change how we calculate that, so we're going to calculate based on the information we have in this context. So we have the X and the Y, and we also have the tile width and tile height, so we can just know exactly where we want this tile to go. So we're going to create a new vector, the first parameter being the X, and that's going to be X times tile width, and the second is Y times tile height. And then after that we can remove these two lines here, this line here, and then the declaration of the vector at the top of the function there. And that should again result in the same behavior. And there it is. Okay, cool. Fantastic. So we've got our housekeeping items tackled now. What we're going to do is move on to actually introducing the map editor project. So what that's going to involve is us creating a new project other than the game, which we'll do right now. So if we right click on the solution for the game, right click, add new project. What we want is a Windows Forms. Now we could use WPF. That would probably be a little bit more of a politically correct framework to use in this day and age, but I feel like this is going to be more than suitable for our needs, and using WPF will take away, I think, a lot of the value of simplicity in what we're doing here, and it'll just add extra confusion for anyone who's not used it before, so it's just unnecessary. Now when we choose Windows Forms app, we want obviously C#, we also want .NET Framework, not the .NET Core, not .NET Standard, .NET Framework. I could cover why that is important in another video, just trust me for now, this is what we want to go for. So hitting next on that guy, we want to call this a Dirt Game Editor, which makes sense, right? So hit create, and we'll be presented with this absolutely marvelous blank canvas of a form. He doesn't really do anything special. If I hit start, you'll notice it doesn't launch the form, it launches the game, which is not what we want at this point in time. That is because the default startup project is still the game, as you can see by the bold text in the Solution Explorer over here. Now we can change that by right clicking on the game editor and then hitting set as startup project. Now what that means now is if we hit the start button, it will launch the form. So the initial problem you see here is it's kind of hovering up here in the top left, which is less than ideal if you've got a big monitor or high resolution. So what we want to do is we want to centralize this, and that can be done relatively easy. So if we hit the form in this design tab here, we'll have a start position property here. We'll change that to center screen. Hitting start again should give us a central window. There we go. Okay. So that's that. We have our form project. Where do we go next? Well, it's all good having a Windows Form project, but we want to start introducing some monogame behavior into it, right? And that requires some additional work. So we want to add another NuGet package, as well as the original MonoGame and MonoGame Extended packages to this project. When we added them previously, they were specifically for this project. So if we right click on the game editor, manage NuGet packages, search for MonoGame, and we want Windows DX, so the same as we did previously, install, and then of course we want MonoGame Extended, which is handily already in this list. Install that. Okay. And then additionally what we want is MonoGame Forms, and you'll see there's MonoGame Forms DX chap here. So there's a lot of libraries that do this and provide this behavior, and I'll explain what that behavior is in a minute, but this one is probably the easiest one to follow for the sake of this video, just because it's consistent with what I'm using, and if you guys need any help with anything, I can answer questions relatively easily. So we want to choose MonoGame Forms DX, install 238. Okay. Oh, I hit cancel. That was not good. Okay. Okay, so what does that do? Well, in a Windows Forms application, we have a toolbox which is just full of what are called controls. So the controls are text boxes, progress bars, list boxes, buttons, etc. And you can drop them onto the form, like so. Here's a button. You know, when you launch the app, you can start click on it. I can show you that really quickly now. So here's a button. It doesn't do anything, but here's a button, and that's what they are called, controls. So because forms work solely with controls, we need a monogame control, and that's what that third library gives us. Now, it doesn't give us one out of the box. We need to create one and expose that to the editor, but it gives us all the tools we need to do that. So how do we do that? Well, we first need to create a class. So if you head over to our game editor project, right click, add new item, and we'll call this the MonoGame Editor. Take away the one. So he's a fairly standard class, but what he's going to do is extend. So we've got colon MonoGame control, and then you'll notice he's complaining this class doesn't exist. Well, that's because we don't have the namespace up here. So if we hit control period on that, using MonoGame forms control, and that'll then turn that into a lovely, lovely light color. So over back in the form, if we hit the toolbox, you'll notice nothing's changed here. Oh, actually it has changed here. I thought you had to build for that. Well, that was awkward. Okay, so here's the MonoGame editor. That was unexpected. And what we can do now is we can drop this guy into the project. But what? Oh! Oh! I bet it is because I need to build. The blasted thing's lying to me. There it is. Wow, that was highly frustrating. It led me into a false sense of security. Okay, so note, when you've done this stage, hit build, okay? Then back in the form, it will show up in the toolbox here, and then you can drag it in. Okay. Well, that was an absolute train wreck. So if we, right, we've got our control in here, we can drag this out just to fill the window a little bit more. And then when we hit the start button, you'll see that we're provided with a monogame context here in the infamous cornflower blue. We're not telling it to do that in cornflower blue, it's just happening and doing that for us. We can control that, but we'll worry about that later. So we've got our control here, we've got some monogame stuff going on, but we don't have our map, which is what we're aiming for, right? So what do we need to do next? Well, we've got our map class in here, but that's no good. It needs to be accessible for the editor as well. So the next step we need to take is introduce a third project, and that's going to be our engine library. It's going to be a source of code where both projects can share functionality. So if we add a new project to the solution, so right click solution, add new project, and we search for class library. And again, we want the .NET framework in C#, not Visual Basic. Hit next, and we'll call this the game engine. Create. So he's a pretty dumb source of code right now. He doesn't have anything special going on. He has no knowledge of monogame or monogame extended. So again, we need to repeat that process, but just for the first two libraries. We don't need the control one in here. So if we right click on the project, manage NuGet packages, browse monogame, install DX, and then we want to repeat the same for extended. All of these projects are going to make some use of extended at some point, and it just makes sense to have them available. Okay, so we've got our monogame libraries in there now. So what we want to do next is we want to move our map to this library, and then what's going to happen is both the game and the editor are going to use that map. Okay? So if we drag our map class down to the engine, it will duplicate the class into the engine and leave the original. So if we open up the map class here, you'll see he knows about the orthographic camera, and he knows about the sprite batch and graphics device, because we've already added the NuGet packages and the namespaces are there from the original file we just copied. So that's fine. He's going to play ball. We can delete the original class that comes in the library just for cleanliness. Okay, and now we can also remove the map from the game. So now we're just left with our one map class in the engine. But wait! The game is complaining the map does not exist. Well, of course. The map no longer exists in this project, does it? No, it exists in the engine. So what do we need to do to rectify that problem? Well, we need to add a reference to the library where the map exists. So we need to add a reference to the engine. So if we right click on our game, right click, add reference, you'll see in here there's a project section, and then we have our two other projects rather, and we have the engine here. So if we check that box, hit OK, well, that all looks good, right? Well, no. Map is inaccessible due to its protection level. So it knows the map class exists, but it can't get to it. Well, what that means is just because of the public accessor on the class in map. So in the engine we have our map class, but the only thing that can see that map class and use that map class is the engine library itself. But that's no use to us. So what we need to do to change that is we need to make this map class public. Okay, and that suddenly just gets rid of all our errors. That's because now the game, which is accessing the engine library, can see the map class and use it. So if we now head over to the game and launch it, we should end up with the net same behavior as before, but we're using the code from somewhere else. So if we right click on the game, debug, start new instance, and there you can see the game working as it always has done, but the code doesn't live in the game anymore. So that also means the editor can use it. So what we need to do is we need to incorporate that behavior in the editor now as well. So how do we do that? Well, if we head over to the editor and then look at the MonoGame editor control we made, it's blank right now, there's nothing there, but this class works very similarly to the game class in the game, the main game. So what we can do is we can close all these and leave open just the main game and our game editor. So we need to replicate some of the behavior that this game does in the editor. So how do we do that? Well, the first things we need our map, right? So we need our map. We'll port him over to here. And you'll notice straight away, wait a minute, where's the map? I can't see the map. Well, if I hit Control period, where is it? I still can't add a using for it. Oh, of course. So the reason for that is we haven't added the reference from the editor to the engine like we did from the game to the engine. So we need to add the reference. So if we right click on the editor, add reference to the engine. And what that means now is if we hit Control period on map again, we can add the using for it. Now there's a problem here with this. You'll notice it all says the game, when really it probably should say the game engine. We'll rectify that in a moment though. So what we can do next is then obviously incorporate the rest of the behavior. So to do that, what else do we need to instantiate the map? So we have a map there, we create it here, and we need the initialize function. And like I said, this works very similarly to the game, so we just override initialize, and then copy this code in there. Let's put this after the initialize. Now you'll notice what I said before in that the MonoGame methods here don't require a call to the base because they just exist for your convenience. This MonoGame control isn't quite the same and it needs to call through, which is a little inconvenient, but it is what it is. So leave that at the top there, we can't remove that. And then next what we need is a call to draw to then draw the map. So we'll override draw. We'll leave the base.draw in there again and do everything after that. So if we take our mymap.draw, put that after, it's then going to complain about a sprite batch because you'll notice in the game we created a sprite batch. So we have a sprite batch here, which we instantiate here, and then use in the draw. But we don't need to create one in this MonoGame control. One is created already for us. We just need to access it a little bit differently. So if we type in this draw function, editor.sprite batch, that should give us a sprite batch to work with. So what happens now? Well, if I hit start, there you'll have it. There's our map in the editor. This is not the game, this is the form we created, but there's all the MonoGame code being executed in this new form window, which then gives us a ton of opportunities to start adding controls around it, such as buttons, lists, all kinds of different stuff that we can start using for editing maps, and that's exactly what we want, with none of the baggage of having to create all these buttons and behaviors in MonoGame. So we're now at a good point, which is perfect. The only thing I have to sort out, I think, is just this namespacing issue. So like I say, if I drop both of these projects, head over to the engine, open up the map, you see the namespace, this is the game, and really this should probably be the game engine. So I'm going to add engine onto there. We might get some complaints because none of the code knows where it is. So if we head over to, let's go to the main game first, hit control period on there, using the game engine, and then we head over to the map editor, hit control period on there, hit enter using the game engine, and of course the game doesn't exist because we've just removed that from the engine, and this project has no reference to the game. So we delete that and hit start. We have the net same result. Perfect. So we now have a blank canvas to start making an editor, and from here forwards we can make a list of tiles which you can then drop in there and start changing how this looks. Now that's going to be an incremental approach. It's not a simple task, but because we tackled this in Windows Forms, it is going to be much simpler. So that is a big first step we've just taken there. And next we'll start looking at broadening the functionality around that. So what have we done today? Well, we've taken our original code, we've tidied it up a little bit, we've updated all the libraries so we're actually in the 21st century. We've moved out the map functionality from the game, so the game knows nothing of that, into the engine. The engine now controls how a map works, such that the game and the editor behave the same way when using maps, which is exactly what we want. If we change the engine, we want the game and the editor to change their behavior as well. And we've also created a Windows Forms project, which has some MonoGame functionality in there that we can then start increasing in feature richness. There it is. So that actually covers it for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. I look forward to working on the next episode. I look forward to making this a really cool editor where we can do a lot more fun stuff with it. We can have loading and saving of maps, dropping spawn points in there. We can do virtually anything from this point forward. We can have a quick play button, so you hit like a button and it'll launch it into the game, so you can walk around it almost instantaneously. The possibilities are endless at this stage. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working on it, and I really look forward to working on the next episode. So take it easy, guys, and speak to you soon. Thank you very much.